Hello, I'm Dominic Morris, head of the senior living team at Gowling WLG. Today in our senior living podcast series, I'm joined by Jenny Butzerki, from the later living team at PRP Architects. Jenny is a leading expert in the field of retirement housing and care home design. And today we're going to be looking at the architect's perspective on some of the key trends and issues affecting the senior living sector. So hi, Jenny.
Hi, Dominic.
If we could begin, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and your practice?
Yes, thank you. Well, thank you for inviting me along today. I'm an architect by trade. I'm a partner at PRP, and PRP are actually quite a large residential architectural practice. And the team that I sit within is the later living team. I lead it, and we've got about 30 plus designers who work exclusively on older people's housing and care homes. We've had a team at PRP for over 20 years, and we've delivered about over 11,000 units in that time, which is fantastic. And we design everything from the bespoke care home right up to the larger retirement villages, and lots of different types of intergenerational housing in between. We've been lucky, or delighted, I should say, to have won 10 Happy Awards since they were first come in over 10 years ago, and we've been shortlisted for a few more, including some this year. But I would say the one thing about our team is that not only are we really passionate about what we do, but we look beyond the architecture continuously. We're looking always at policy, at legislation, what affects our sector, because that can be anything from planning legislation to building regs. It can be through to welfare reform, and we're always looking at ways of challenging how legislation does affect what we do on a day-to-day basis. We get involved in a lot of design guidance as well, but we're always looking at emerging trends and trying to keep ahead of what's happening in the sector. But as architects, really for us, it's about creating beautiful places where people can thrive in their later years in life.
That's great. So I guess one of the sort of the key trends emerging in senior living is the growth of the urban settings, the growth of the urban models, and mixed-use schemes, sort of increasingly complex schemes where senior living sort of knits in as part of a wider mixed-use opportunity. Can you talk to us a little bit about sort of what some of the key architectural trends you're seeing around that, and the sort of the high street piece, the 15-minute neighborhood, all these sort of concepts?
Yeah, I mean, we, again, go back to Happy Report some 10 years ago. One of the big things that had come out of that was about considering location and making sure that older people were close to amenities and facilities. And it's taken a little bit of time for that to filter through. But I guess, before the pandemic a year ago, we saw very much the high streets really struggling. That's something that's not going to look better unless there's some serious change to how they're approached. But for us, we're seeing a lot of clients now thinking, well, this is a fantastic opportunity for older people. So if you think a 15-minute neighbourhood for you and I is probably 25 minutes for the same walk for somebody who's in the later years. So it's even more important that they're actually at the heart of communities, and at the heart of communities that they've lived in all their lives. They don't want to move somewhere else. But I think the exciting thing for us as designers is that looking at the town centres, about creating this sense of a destination in those, and it's not about shopping anymore. It's about experiences, and we talk about sticky streets where you get create that sort of public square that people want to visit, and there's lots of different things, activities happening, and it's leisure, it's eating out in restaurants, it's going to bars, it's doing a bit of shopping, probably more boutique shopping we'll see in the future than some of the larger chain stores, which are all now going online. And we've got a number of schemes in planning at the minute that are looking at exactly that model. And I think it's really exciting. If you want to bring vibrancy back to the high streets, you need people to live there. And if they're older people living there, then they're less likely to be going out to work every day. So that means you've got constant footfall, you've got immediate vibrancy to those spaces. I think as a designer, there are challenges. You've got to make sure that we respect thresholds between different usages. So being very clear about what's public, what's semi-public, and what's private, because the residents obviously want to have their privacy. And there's also things around, open space, having public squares where everyone, all generations mix is absolutely what we must have. But equally for the older residents, they also need some outdoor space that's, whether it's shared within their community or some individual outdoor space, such as balconies and roof terraces and the like. And with mixed use, there's practicalities that we have to look at too. There's all the things that happen back of house. So deliveries, getting your refuse out without impeding on people's day-to-day lives, and also getting parking so people can easily get to their apartments. And again, separating the residential parking from the public parking is also quite key. So there's lots of challenges in it, but it's actually a really exciting model, and we're really looking forward to some of these getting built, because I think it will start to set a new model for the high streets, which has to happen really. So it's very exciting.
That's great. I think particularly for sort of retirement communities, one of the key selling points is their ability to invite the community in to use, say, restaurants and sort of health and well-being facilities. Are you seeing as an increasing trend of that?
Yeah, well, I mean, traditionally those are the parts of the sort of retirement living schemes that can be difficult to make stack up financially. So if you can place them as the same as any other restaurant or shop, on the high street scenario where the public are using it as well as the residents are using it, that just automatically increases the viability of them. But they have to be designed from the outset to be that forward, front-facing facility, that a front-facing restaurant. It has to look like a destination that anybody in the community would want to go to, and not feel like it belongs to the residents. So there is a bit in design that has to be carefully thought through to make sure that you do get that feeling of somewhere that's attractive, that all parts of the community want to go to. But yeah, it's a very interesting model, and I think it's one we're going to see increasingly coming into our portfolio in the next few years.
Yeah, there certainly seem to be some excellent examples emerging. And then turning to sort of another, I guess, growth trend, rental for later living. From a sort of a design perspective, what are the sort of particular challenges that you have to grapple with?
Well, I guess there's a few different forms of rental. You've got a lot of our private providers are now looking at having it so that you could actually, flexibility behind it, so you could either go in and purchase your dwelling, or you could actually rent it. And I think this partly that's a response to what's been happening in the country in the last year as well, because there's people who've been living at home in their own homes, very isolated in the community, suddenly thinking, actually, this is not where I want to be in my later years. I want that sense of community. So they quite often want to make that move quite quickly. So to sell a house and buy another house is a bit of a difficult thing for them to do. So actually being able to just rent it and see if it suits them before they make the move is actually quite a good thing. There's also other providers in the market, such as Birchgrove, who are looking at just private rental. But when it comes to design of them, I think we looked at PRS when it first appeared as a form of housing, and we couldn't help but feel it looked very much like a lot of the retirement communities we were designing. It's about the lifestyle, the facilities that are available to residents, and the design of those. And I think when you're looking particularly at rental, where you need to create that sense of community a little bit faster maybe than people buying into or maybe staying in the villages for longer, you need an immediate sense of vibrancy when people walk in to look at the development for the first time, for them to walk in and think, yep, this is where I want to be. So those spaces don't have to be vast spaces, but they need to be small, busy, and attractive in their design, and feel like something that someone could slot into very easily. I think, again, the apartments is slightly different, because we need to make sure there's a robustness to the finishes that are going in there, and that, if it's a case of it's in the rental sector where you might be greater, I don't really like the term, but a greater rate of churn, where you've more people moving in than you would in a for sale model. You need to make sure that the apartments are sufficiently robust that whenever one tenant moves out and another moves in, that the maintenance team can get in and they can change anything needs changing quickly. They can quickly turn it around, because obviously the longer it's going through a refurb, then that's more downtime that you're not renting your apartment out for. So there is a bit of work to do around there with regards to design and specification. But I think it is something that the private rental sector are doing very well, and something we've been learning from.
Very, very interesting you say that there isn't that great gulf between sort of the BTR, sort of mainstream BTR product, and what, let's say, the housing with care market is delivering in terms of product you physically see, even with the for sale model.
No, I think when we looked at
so that yeah, they're very interesting.
When we looked at some of the big developments that we've worked on in Wembley, and like when they first were on the drawing boards, we just thought, oh, that looks like extra care on steroids, because it was like so much bigger than anything we'd ever done. But the facilities were really, really similar. The only thing that was missing was a care team on site. So yeah, I think it's there's a lot to be learned between the two sectors.
Very good. So that's sort of, I guess, more of an urban focus, although there is obviously rental out of town as well, but it's sort of turning to the more rural locations and the sort of traditional retirement village setting. Again, what are some of the sort of design challenges for you, and what are the distinctions in terms of the products that clients are looking to deliver in those settings?
Well, you've got sort of suburban ones, which are kind of on the edge of towns, and then you've got the really rural ones. The really rural ones are probably more difficult to get through planning these days, but equally they both appeal to a certain market. Certain, if you've lived in a more rural or suburban setting all your life, you're unlikely to want to move into a high street somewhere in London, really. So it goes back to this is one size fits all. There has to be choice there, and definitely the out of town developments, they need to be a little bit more standalone, and so any facilities you put in there need to be sustainable for that community itself. Having said that, a lot of the more suburban ones still very much look at opening their doors to the wider community, and so again, it's about considering your clubhouse facilities and how that relates to any existing communities that are there. And actually really sort of embedding it in what's missing out of that community potentially. I think the other thing that those sites opportunity they give us this great opportunity to be closer to nature, and to have the landscaping be something that's that much more luscious than maybe in an urban setting, and it gives people that potential to be closer to nature. And we know again in the last year how important people's outdoor space has been, and in the slightly less dense settings, you can really create some amazing landscape settings. We've got one village that's been finished a few years now, and the allotments in it are absolutely to die for. They're fantastic views, allotments that I have never seen plants like in my life. Little summer houses people have built. They all go out there and have their gin and tonics in the evening, and they've got quite a little community within that retirement village. So I think they've also got lots of things like woodland walks through it, and if you go to that particular village in a first thing in the morning, everybody's out walking their dogs. So I think there's a lot to benefit from those slightly more out of town settings, but the quantum of development needs to be usually sort of at least over 150 units nowadays to actually be able to make that into a community, make it sustainable.
So it's pretty clear from what you've been saying, there's sort of the huge diversity of, call it, product that's on the market, and we haven't even touched on care homes. But I guess in delivering any of this, you have to overcome the very many challenges of our planning system. I wondered if you could sort of share a few thoughts about how you engage and what your sort of contribution is in helping clients to navigate those, let's say, choppy waters.
I guess we see, because we work with lots of different clients on lots of different tenures and lots of different products and lots of different sites, we see quite a variety of approaches. I would say to any client to do your homework first. So look at the planning authority you're thinking of building, and there are some that are much more open to these types of buildings or communities than others. But the NPPF has made it very clear that local authorities should be considering what is the offer for older people in their communities. It doesn't always happen, and where it doesn't happen, we should really be challenging that. And we have some local authorities we've gone to who say that they don't need any housing or care homes for older people, they've got enough, and yet their demographics are like spiking like this, and they don't have enough that's actually coming forward. But I'd say engaging with planners at the earliest possible time you can will ease the way through planning, and that's looking. We've got one particular client who looks at the call for site stages, considers how they can get sites into it, to actually put it straight into the local authority's mind that they should be thinking about what's for older people. We're also seeing, recently we've had the National Design Code that's come out, and there's a lot of mention in it of older people, which is really welcomed. Planning performance agreements are something a lot of clients are doing now, and again, that's a really good way of sort of bringing the planning authorities along that journey with you, and so there's no big surprises when the project goes into planning. One of the things that I've really enjoyed in the last year has been looking at community consultation in a very different way. We've gone through a phase, I would say, some years ago, where we all have to do community consultation before a project goes into planning, and you do a one-day event in a church hall somewhere, and somebody's a bit angry and they turn up and they do a bit of shouting at everybody, and then everybody else gets a bit riled up, and actually the clients tick the box, we've done our community consultation, but actually, has it really worked? Have the local community had their say? Have those people who are not so vocal been able to sort of ask the questions they want to ask? And the answer is really no. And in the last year, we've a project in West Byfleet that we've worked on, which is redesigning the centre really of West Byfleet. And the consultation has been an absolutely really empowering road journey that we've been on with the client and with the local community. And the client employed a PR consultant that basically has bi-weekly and fortnightly meetings with the local community. There's various focus groups get set up within that, and we go along and we've presented all the way through the design process of that. So when it's been early sketch scheme, we're sharing early sketch schemes. The local community have been able to send in questions in advance. They can also ask questions in the chat. And then as the design developed before it went into planning, we've actually been able to share our 3D models with them and walk around the model. So they get a bit of sense of where we are with the design, they get a sense of the place that we're trying to create. And actually they can also see that there's bits of that model that haven't been finished yet because there's walls that don't meet or something. And they see that we're not showing them a fait accompli. We're actually showing them something that is in progress. So that has been a really positive one. And I really hope clients sort of take the lessons learned from those consultation events and progress with those. And that scheme's gone into planning and it's had minimal objections to it, considering the size of the development. So it has to be a positive way forward, and I really hope that's one of the things that we definitely change the way we work into the future in that.
Excellent. That does sound very positive. I suppose if we look at sort of wider COVID learnings, and I know your firm has done sort of quite a lot of work around this in terms of, I think you've issued certain papers, various papers, like your Safe, Happy and Together paper on safer design, I guess, in response to COVID and similar diseases. If you could like share with some of your thoughts around that.
So we've produced 2 papers now. Actually, the second one's just been launched. Both of them called Safe, Happy Together, both looking at slightly different things. One's very much looking at later living sector, and one is looking at the care home sector, because they're quite different in the way they need to control infections. They're different models. I would say what we did in advance of to produce those papers is we actually went back and spoke to our clients. We tried to find out how buildings had worked during COVID from the early stages and how they'd managed to keep people safe in the buildings and control the infection. But what's become apparent is that it's not just about controlling the infection, it is about people's mental well-being, it's about their physical well-being. And we wanted to understand how well the buildings had actually performed in supporting the staff in those. I think overall, it's been very positive, the feedback we've got, and the staff have, particularly in the later living, they've said, actually, if a lot of our residents have been living out in the community, they would have had nobody looking in on them, they have nobody making sure they've had a meal each day. But we've looked at the design aspects of it, and I think well-being is one of the key things that's come out. And so outdoor space has been huge in that, and always looking at how our gardens are designed, how they relate to the building, making sure everybody's got a bit of outdoor space that's theirs, that they can be safely outside. In some instances, be able to talk to a relative in the garden and keep that distance. The other thing, I suppose, is the importance of home in the last year for us all has become more and more something that we're all focusing our minds on what works well in our house and what doesn't. And our dwellings always need to be designed to be spacious, to have good daylight in them. But ventilation has been one thing that's been huge on the agenda. So we're looking more at potential for putting sort of potentially deck access in, so you get dual aspect dwellings. So, you know, increasing, maximising the potential for ventilation in those. We've looked at the daylight and the views out. So where you're maybe in a care home setting where you aren't so able to get out, having that visual connection, at least to outside, is really important. Being able to see a relative even outside your window, those sorts of things. And then also looking down to sort of the nuances around how common spaces have been designed, and you know, making sure that deliveries can come into a building safely and not through necessarily the same entrance as a member of the public's coming through or a member of staff's coming through. And thinking about things like where your staff accommodation is located, so that your staff restroom, ideally a member of staff can come in from the outside, shower, get changed into their work uniform, and then go into the building, and then vice versa on the way home, so you're not carrying infections into the building. And I think a lot of those will be things that we will see embedding more so into our designs as time goes on. And I'm sure there'll be more thinking around it. But I have to say, for me, ventilation and garden space have been the two big key things that we've always promoted, but now they are more important than ever. And I don't think we'll get anybody that would sort of, any client would say that they're not important anymore. I think they all appreciate just how essential it is to particularly this market.
Both of which seem like quite easy wins, you'd hope.
They do, but you'd be surprised at how often that they are challenged, I would say.
That's great. I think for our listeners, definitely recommend you go onto the PRP website and have a look at those Safe, Happy and Together papers. They are thought-provoking and very interesting. If we could then sort of turn, Jenny, to look at technology. So the sort of use of technology in property is growing exponentially, and you know, beyond sort of bricks and mortar, it's all about how your space operates and performs and how you can monitor it. But from your perspective, it is right from the get-go, I guess, that sort of new technologies and digital twins, use of BIM are at play, and particularly in sort of later living space, be it care homes or housing with care, the benefits, because these are sort of operational property businesses, the benefits that can be driven from the clever and appropriate use of technology, I think, are going to be vast. Could you sort of characterize it a bit from your perspective as to how you're sort of adapting to the uses of these technologies, and B, some examples of how they are being used in some of the schemes?
Sure. I mean, I guess it's threefold in a way. There's the first bit is really designing using technology, and yeah, we use BIM across all our projects. We implemented Revit in the practice some 10 years ago, and it's embedded in everything we do from the outset of designs right through to construction. It's an amazing way to design. You get, you know, we're working on much more complex buildings, I would say, these days compared to 10, 15 years ago. So it gives us the ability to build everything in 3D, to look at everything in 3D, from the consultation events I was just talking to about, right through to the construction. And when we're doing the technical design, you can see very quickly, working with other consultants, where all the clashes might happen, and you design them out before it gets to site. That is incredibly beneficial, I would say, to contractors and to us. And we build these models quite, you know, they're quite intense. They're quite heavy going bits of software we need for them, but they can actually look at even things like modular construction and how that can you can actually bring in boxes, and you can actually design. You can show how they all fit together, and so it is a different way to design. I think architects have always thought that way in their heads, but actually being able to draw that way completely, and using BIM technology is amazing. The next bit is how your buildings are then managed, and some clients are getting to grips with that now, taking those BIM models and continuing with them. And I think with the onus on building owners now for keeping digital records, we're going to see that increasing dramatically over the next few years. And we do have a lot of clients, a lot of the bigger landlords who already have a system that they run their facilities management on. And that's, for them, that's a big shift to going to these 3D models. But fire safety records are the one thing that's driving it for a lot of them. So we're getting a lot of clients that are actually looking at creating digital records for existing buildings. But the fire safety behind those, how the information's relayed to their staff, to their residents through these models it can be beneficial. So I'm hopeful that the facilities management teams will start to pick it up and that they'll start to run with it. I would say the third thing is the residents' perspective. We know that our buildings are becoming more complex, with all the sustainability measures that are brought into it. And we do a lot of post-occupancy. And I think for our residents, we're expecting them to make quite a big leap sometimes to the different systems that have been put into the buildings. And, if they move in, they don't necessarily get quite the level of information that they need to be able to understand how a lot of the systems work. And we go back and put sensors in. We've gone back and put sensors into people's apartments and done interviews with them about how to use their apartment. And then when we've checked the sensors after a year of the building, you can actually see quite clearly what's been working well and what's not been working well. And then you need to re-educate people about, why. The classic is a lady who said, "Oh, I have always opened my windows, even in the winter time." And we're going, "Yes, but that's why your bills are a bit high, because you've got electric underfloor heat and it's trying to heat up the space, and you've got a mechanical heat recovery system that is actually already ventilating your space. As soon as you open your window, those two things are going a bit out of kilter, and they're trying to overcompensate for the fact there's an open window." So I think the systems themselves need to sort of push forward a little bit, so that some of them are a bit more intuitive to use. But there is an education for the residents as well. I would say technology, one thing about technology in this sector, again, in the last year has been amazing. We're seeing hotel style systems on tablets coming into a lot of the buildings now, instead of the old warden call system where everybody was pulling cords. And because of what's happened in the last year, our residents are actually getting to grips with them a lot better than they've ever done. But equally, a lot of the health professionals also are getting to grips with them a lot better, and they're using them, and they're encouraging the residents to use them. But we've heard some lovely stories from some client groups saying things like, well, they've had a number of villages, for example, who've never met or been to each other's village, and they're holding virtual choirs across the villages and virtual crafting sessions. So, they're creating a social life online that these residents would never have experienced before. So I think that's just absolutely amazing. And a lot of our clients are saying we're going to keep that going definitely as time goes on. So I think that's great news.
One of the positives from the last 12 months, definitely. It is I guess some of the same area, but the wider issue of sustainability and ESG, and what are you sort of seeing from your clients? I mean, for me, the senior living sector, particularly sort of retirement housing with care, is absolutely ripe for delivering zero net carbon and meeting these sustainability targets.
Yeah, definitely are. I mean, unlike sort of the house builder sector, for example, our clients aren't in it to build a house and sell it. They're in it to build, operate, manage. They're there for the long term. So they're always looking at it in the long term. And we're probably seeing more buildings in our team than others across the practice looking at the net zero carbon targets. So we've gotten quite a few of them in planning already, that are looking sort of not just at some of them looking at the lifetime of the building, some are looking at in operation. So we're seeing a variety in the approach, but it's definitely in the up, and more of the buildings, I would say, are looking at net carbon zero in some form, than are not looking at them, which is great. But design wise, it's we have to start looking at everything from a passive perspective to start with, from the actual design, and then looking at a lot of the systems and the technologies that are coming in, and how you can actually make them part of the building and the building fabric rather than being bolt-ons. And looking at even at the embodied carbon is quite interesting. So recycling materials of something that's been demolished where you can. It's not that easy, but you can. but actually looking at the specification of materials to look at the embodied carbon of it. And manufacturers are completely getting this, and they're expecting us now to ask the question, which is great. Because we are asking questions, we have to make sure we specify local, that the carbon used in production is kept to minimum, and that actually the item can be recycled afterwards. And then clients are also looking at, what do they do to offset what carbon is used. And that's really interesting, because actually you start looking at offsetting measures that you can do, and that could be anything from planting forests, to actually putting money from one development into investing in an existing community to try and improve its carbon footprint, and looking at how they might do transports and making sure they've got electric vehicles as taxis in the schemes. There's a lot of the things that need to go into getting to that net carbon zero target. But again, I would say education of ongoing systems is huge. Overheating of buildings versus ventilation of buildings, all those things need to be really, really well looked into. So that, again, it's if you're putting technologies in to manage those things, educating the staff that are running the buildings so they understand how they work, educating the residents that move in so they understand the work, and the residents actually want to know these things before they buy into a lot of the developments. So actually saying, not only have we achieved this, but when you move in, we will expect you to do this, this, and this, and this to be part of our journey. I think then empowers them to understand what sustainability means in its widest sense and be part of that with the client. So it's exciting.
It is very exciting, but also sort of an awful lot for everyone to do, isn't there? That's
it is,
sure.
It is
so
complicated, but necessary.
Complicated. So if we can sort of wrap it up, I think, with a bit of future gazing on your behalf, say in 10 years' time, what will a typical retirement village and a typical care home scheme look like? Not that there is any typical, but have a go.
I hope in 10 years' time there won't be a typical one. I hope that there will be. I think we will see an increase in supply, definitely, because in the last year our clients are already telling us that despite what might be in the press quite often, that they are actually getting more and more inquiries to move into both care homes and to later living schemes. I think care homes, we will probably see quite a few close, some of the older ones. If you think of a care home that maybe has bedrooms that doesn't have en suites, that's really difficult to actually be able to control any sort of infection, and it's actually what people just don't want anymore. So I think we may see older care homes close, and you may then see sort of not an increase in the number of care beds in the UK. Hopefully the new ones coming in will at least compensate for those that end up closing. I think in later living we will see an increase in the number of units coming forward. But for me, I think there's a lot coming in legislation. We've seen an open letter to the Prime Minister this week, really calling out for setting up a task force to look at this sector. And it would be amazing if that happens. And because there are lots of bits of legislation, I think, that need to really sort of be amended or brought in. The one thing I would really like to see, as I head that way myself in about 15 years' time, is that divergence of models, because there is no one size fits all. What you want in your retirement will be very different to what I want in my retirement. And at the minute, there just isn't enough choice. So I hope we'll see more choice in 10 years' time.
Excellent. So to conclude, more product, more choice, more technology, more sustainability.
And better legislation.
Better legislation, which is probably where I come in. That's great. Thank you very, very much, Jenny. That's really interesting.
Thank you, Dominic. It's been great to talk to you today. Thank you.